Welcome into Kingdom Keys, the official pregame podcast for Arrowhead Pride with Maurice Elston and Nate Christensen. I am Nick Schwerdt, getting ready for the Chiefs Divisional Round matchup versus the Buffalo Bills. I'll tell you what, guys, about 4 weeks ago, I probably wouldn't have predicted we would still be doing pregame shows for the Chiefs. So in a weird way, a team that has won 2 of the last 5 Super Bowls, been to 5 consecutive AFC championship games. I know this probably sounds blasphemous if any other fan base is listening to me say this, but it kind of feels like we're playing with house money at this point, because there were several points during the season where it didn't exactly look like this team was headed for any sort of postseason run.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. It was a point in the season where I was like, definitely, I think it was when the Chiefs got in, when Denver got into within one game of the Chiefs, and I was like, oh my God, they're gonna drop a couple of more games, and we've got a potential that they may not make the playoffs. Or I was really feeling like they'll make it and be one and done. Like, that's kind of the feel that it was. So, and it was weird to even feel that way, because it was just at the beginning of the year, I was like, oh, this team is definitely AFC Championship or Super Bowl, right? So to be here another week, I'll take it.
What about you, Nate? I'm not saying you were the biggest pessimist, but I think you were the first to sort of sound the alarms on this team. So I'm curious how you feel about the Chiefs now getting ready for a divisional game.
Not gonna lie, last week's game didn't really surprise me. Like, I think I picked it to be 24-13, so it was a little bit wide of a margin, but like, I don't really think last week's game against the Dolphins is like indicative of what they're going to look like moving forward, just because it was not the best version of Miami between their injuries, between the cold weather, which was absolutely, it was a fact for both teams. Certainly both teams are playing it, and injuries are part of the game. But I still like this week is like honestly going to be the test on like whether I was like wrong about this team or not, because like I don't think the last 2 weeks against Jake Browning and whatever was left of the Dolphins last week really changes a lot of my concerns about this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But certainly it's a good win. A playoff win's always a good win, regardless.
I will say this to what you just said about like being wrong about this team. If the Chiefs do win this weekend against Buffalo, and maybe even win next week, if they have to go to Baltimore or play Houston, I don't necessarily think that means that anybody was wrong about this team. Anybody who was pointing out all of the very obvious flaws all season, because that will happen, by the way. You'll start to see it on social media. I'm sure some of the players will even say it. Nobody believed in us. Everybody doubted us. It's like, well, with good reason. We weren't making stuff
got blown out by the Raiders at home.
Yeah, you lost to Aiden O'Connell. Okay, so I'm sorry. I got a little concerned in that moment in time. Before we get to the keys, guys, I want to talk about a few other factors that are somewhat unique to this game. The first one being that I kind of mentioned there in my preamble is that this is the first road game, first playoff road game for Patrick Mahomes in his career. Now, I've heard a lot of people reference this, and not just this week, because I think you could kind of see this coming with about a month ago in the regular season, knowing that the Chiefs were probably going to have to go on the road at some point. It's an interesting storyline. It's an interesting like nugget. It's a game note. But I want to make sure nobody's actually implying that like you doubt Patrick Mahomes' ability to go and win on the road in the playoffs, right? Like, how much are we actually taking that into account when sort of analyzing and breaking down this matchup?
Personally, I don't. I don't really care where like Mahomes' stats on the road have always been great. He's won multiple Super Bowls on the road, and neutral site doesn't matter. It's a road game still. I'm not worried about it. I mean, like from his perspective, like I think actually the more concerning part would be actually the rest of the team than Mahomes, because Mahomes is going to show up. He's going to play well. Like I have no doubt in that. But maybe that's something the rest of the team doesn't have the experience of, especially a team of younger players. Still, even though a lot of it is carryover from last year, and played on the road. So I think the rest of the team, it's a bigger deal. For Mahomes, like, no, I don't care. Like, I know he can win a road game, even if he doesn't win this weekend.
Yeah.
What do you think, Maurice?
I got the same type of feeling, really. I'm not worried. I mean, Mahomes has been historically just as good on the road as he's been at home. Like the stat differential in the win percentage is not a drastic enough difference to make a big deal out of it. people are making a big deal out of it, but it really comes down to the fact that he hasn't played a road playoff game speaks to how good he has been on the road and at home during the regular season to even get to the point where he hasn't played a road playoff game whatsoever. So I think it's not going to be a factor. And even I think the Chiefs overall as a team, they went 5-2 on the road this year, played significantly good definitely on the defensive side, whether it was at home or on the road. So I don't think the fact of being away from Arrowhead is going to make that big of an impact on this game at all.
Yeah, I would actually argue that across the course of his career, you could make a case that he's been better on the road statistically, like not just as good. He's been better. The win percentage, I think, is marginally higher, but completion percentage, yards per game, quarterback rating, touchdown to interception ratio, like boom, 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 boom. They've all been better. I don't know the exact reason for that. I do think there's an element of like battening down the hatches when you get on the road, us versus the world. Like we don't get to rely on the home field. The fans aren't going to pick us up if we're not playing well. I don't know the reason for it, but it's why I'm not exactly concerned. I think Patrick Mahomes is our petty king, right? He loves some form, as small as it may be, of motivation to use to get him ready for games, and having to go to Buffalo in front of Bills Mafia, I think that's a perfect opportunity for him. The other thing that's interesting about this game is the rest factor. We talk about having to play that first week and not getting that bye week that the Chiefs have kind of become accustomed to, especially with very important players really needing that extra week of rest. So you don't get that, but because of the weather delay for the Bills game, originally scheduled for last Sunday, it gets moved to Monday. Chiefs played their game on Saturday. 2 extra days of rest this time of year, that feels like that is going to be a factor. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does when you have an injury list, certainly of what the Bills have. And it does seem like the Bills are going to come into a little bit healthier than it looked like, Monday afternoon, I guess, like in the middle of that game. It was like, oh my God, is everyone on the Bills going to get hurt? Because it was like all in like the third quarter, it was like guy getting hurt. It seems like going to be a little bit better, but it doesn't hurt, right? I mean, it's extra like 48 hours of rest. It certainly doesn't hurt. I think it would be a bigger deal if Buffalo was traveling to Kansas City on top of that less rest, and then being at home helps. But I mean, it's certainly any advantage matters when a game is as tight as this one.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I think the 2 days off is very much needed. If you get 2 extra days anytime towards the end into the playoffs in the NFL, you take that rest, especially for your veteran players and even some of your young players like a Rashee Rice for the Chiefs, who hasn't played, the NFL with being a longer season than what's had to be endured in college. Those extra days of rest and recuperation is needed. Travis Kelce, the wear and tear that's been on his body this year. I think that last week off in the season, then these couple of extra days of rest to nurse some of the injuries. You see a lot of the Chiefs that's got this different nicks and nicked up a little bit. That's all on the injury report. So I think that the extra days help. I don't know if it makes or break anything, but whenever you can get an extra couple of days to rest your body, and not just the extra couple of days to rest your body, a couple of extra days of preparation for the coaches to get ready for the game comes into play here too. I think that may be more of where the extra day comes in handy more than just the rest. The giving Andy Reid and Spagnuolo the chance to really be able to prep those extra 2 days where they can actually sit down and watch that Bills game while it was happening and things of that nature. I think that helps as well.
All right, let's get into the keys. But before we do that, guys, you just mentioned it. The injury report looks a little bit different for both of these teams than it probably did earlier in the week. What is the latest for the injury report for both these teams?
The Chiefs have a gauntlet of people on it. But far as out, Derek Nottie is probably the big one you see there, especially with the way Buffalo's been running the ball. Seeing him be out is a big name. I guess Wanya Morris, that concussion must have been a serious concussion because he's full practice participant on Wednesday, got limited Thursday, then did not practice Friday. So had to be some type of setback you think there that put him out. Questionable, Kadarius Toney and Justin Ross is coming into the game, questionable again for the Chiefs. But everybody outside of that looks like they'll play. It was a strong chance, looking like at first that Sky Moore would maybe come off, but he ended up not practicing on Friday after 2 limited, practices. But he's still on injured reserve. As far as the Bills go, Gabe Davis is out. That's going to be, that's a big one for the Bills, honestly. Baylon Spector, the linebacker, he's out. Christian Benford, the cornerback, is out, and Taylor Rapp, the safety, is out. Those are all significant pieces, to Buffalo in some form or fashion. And then you got Terrell Bernard, Tyron Johnson, and Sam Martin, their punter, all who was limited all week and are questionable. So Terrell Bernard, their linebacker, did not practice all week, but they listed him as questionable. So while the Chiefs injury report looks to be a little longer, the doubts of who may actually play lies a little bit thicker on the Buffalo side of things.
The one name that kind of rings a bell is Gabe Davis. That name sounds familiar. Has he ever had a big game against Kansas City in the playoffs? Like, I feel like I remember that.
Because, like, in general, I don't think Gabe Davis is very good, but he just destroys the Chiefs every time. It's like some players, some of those like types of players always have that. Like Dan Torrance against the Broncos that always get picks, and that's like Gabe Davis against the Chiefs. Like, for whatever reason, like the Chiefs just have so much trouble stopping him because, like, in general, he's pretty inconsistent. But for some reason, the Chiefs are something that he gets up for, I guess.
You know what's weird? The Chiefs have 2 Super Bowls in the last 5 years, and the game that I find myself going back or the highlights that I watched the most are of that game 2 years ago against Buffalo, the infamous 13-second game. And some of those plays by Gabe Davis, like just busted coverage after busted coverage, and he's just wide open rolling into the end zone. I'm like, okay. Like, man, this guy made NFL history against the Chiefs, but it's not like because of some otherworldly performance. It's because the Chiefs couldn't cover him. They couldn't find him on defense. All right, let's get into the keys for this game, guys. Nate, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so this is one that's actually going to be on both sides of the ball because a lot of the things about these Chiefs-Bills teams is there's a lot of shared DNA in terms of, Sean McDermott was an Andy Reid assistant. The quarterbacks have similar play styles in their own ways. The way these teams are built are actually pretty similar. The defensive schemes are pretty similar, and that's what I'm going to focus on is what team kind of handles the blitz better, because both these teams are pretty heavy blitzing teams. That's been the difference between the Bills even this year, especially after their injuries, is they've done a really good job of mixing in pressure packages and different designs to kind of make up for the fact that they don't have as much top-end talent as they did last year and in prior years. So let's start with Josh Allen versus the blitz. That is always the thing that my eyes always gravitate towards when we play the Bills, because Steve Spagnuolo will blitz Josh Allen. I was looking at all the numbers this week. So in his last 6 games, starting with the most recent one, he had 17 attempts, 16 attempts, 9 attempts, 11 attempts, 19 attempts, and 15 attempts against the blitz. So the Chiefs will throw a lot of blitzes. They do it around like 40%, 50% of the time when they play him. And it's up and down. Like Josh Allen would get a lot of yards in his most recent performance. It was 11 of 17 for 119 yards and 1 touchdown. The year before, he was 7 of 16, so it was only 44% completion percentage, but it was 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. So when you're trying to blitz Josh Allen, like the things that make it work is that it does make him speed up his process. Josh Allen definitely plays very chaotic at times, especially when his kind of eyes and his feet kind of get everywhere. The problem, though, with blitzing Josh Allen is that he is prone to make the biggest play of the game at any moment. And if he makes a few of those plays, especially with this offense, that's problematic. You don't want Josh Allen having huge explosive plays. It's not a formula for the Chiefs to win. So for Spagnuolo, kind of the question becomes, how much can I afford to blitz Josh Allen to try and disrupt his rhythm while not sacrificing, big plays, for example? And that's where the Gabe Davis thing does matter, but they can generate big plays in other ways. We saw the James Cook breakout last time. On the other side of the ball, the Chiefs did a really good job last week against the blitz. We were about 2 Mecole Hardman touchdowns away from, missed tracks from the blitz numbers just looking outrageous. I thought Kelsey and Rice did a good job finding kind of zone spots. Even MVS had a good identification of a blitz. But the difference in talent between even the Bills with some of their injuries now and last week's Miami's defense is remarkable. Miami did not have any of their guys last week. Buffalo is way more talented. I think they're a smarter blitzing team. So that's where my eyes are going to come down, is how much will Sean McDermott blitz Mahomes and what is the Chiefs' response? But it's especially on the Allen versus Spagnuolo thing, because that's one of my favorite things all the time is watching Josh Allen versus Steve Spagnuolo. And I think Spags has a very interesting question this week on how much he can blitz in and what situations he can do it. And if they're trying to limit as many points scored as possible from the Bills potentially.
So I'm going to jump in here and go out of order this week because I feel like my key is very similar to yours, or at least it's related to yours, Nate. Last week, I talked about the stars on offense needing to show up. And for the most part, they did. Travis Kelce had a really nice bounce back game. I mean, talk about a playoff debut for Rashee Rice. That was incredible to watch. But this week, I'm kind of with you, like, at least in terms of the Chiefs side of things, I'm really interested in seeing what Steve Spagnuolo dials up. Like, it feels like every single year, and especially every single postseason run that the Chiefs have had, there has been one of those games where we leave it and we say, oh, Steve Spagnuolo's had this like up his sleeve for a couple weeks. He has had this game plan ready to go. And I do think, like, I'm looking at the stars again this week, but it's defensively. We saw what L'Jarius Sneed did to Tyreek Hill last week. Like, that was oh, you're not going to name me to the All-Pro team? Watch this, right? That was that sort of game for him against the NFL's best weapon. I don't really know what's going on with Stephon Diggs ever since Ken Dorsey was let go. Like, this has been a really weird role for him, yet the offense, technically, like, the team has been winning more, but has the passing attack really looked like it's been a weird season for Buffalo's offense. So, like, I'm coming into this game knowing I have to fear Josh Allen, but I don't really know how scared I am of this offense in general, because much like the Chiefs have been searching for identity all season long, I feel like that's kind of what the Bills are going through, and they've been carried by heroic play from their quarterback. But you look at last week's game for Allen, it was against the Steelers without J.J. Watt, 3 touchdowns, completed 70% of his passes. The big stat for me, though, is 0 interceptions. Like, if for people who watch the red zone all season long and you're not watching every single game, you would see the final 2 minutes of a Bills game, and then you would see Josh Allen throw a pick, and you'd say, oh, this guy can't stop throwing interceptions. Josh Allen's actually had a pretty good year. He's had some really untimely mistakes. Mm-hmm. Last week, guys, it was the 4th game of the season where Josh Allen didn't have a pick. 4th. And it was the 2nd time since October 1st, which is what I think week 5. He's had a turnover issue his entire career. This season, it seems to have really amped up once again. And with Trent McDuffie, L'Jarius Sneed, and Chris Jones applying pressure from the interior, this seems like one of those games where either the stars have to play like stars, much like I said last week about the offense, or Steve Spagnuolo needs to dive deep into his bag and pull out one of those 1 in 100 game plans that Josh Allen and the Bills simply can't be prepared for. I am all over the Chiefs defense showing up, and like the storyline all season, elite defense, best defense of Mahomes' career. This is the defining moment for the Chiefs defense to say, yes, it hasn't been a fluke. Everybody talked about the Niners. Everybody talked about the Browns. We are one of the league's elite defenses.
You know, I just mentioned about the Dolphins missing all their guys. So are the Steelers. Like, let's be very real about that. The Steelers are playing Miles Jack at one linebacker spot and someone wearing 93. I have no idea, but their middle of field defense was bad. They were missing corners. They were missing TJ Watt. Like, so all that offense, like the Bills offense, I thought did look a little bit sharper last week until it got a little tight in the 3rd. Then they pulled it out. But like, there is much difference in talent and even scheme from Spag. So like, that's like the one thing I would definitely say is that like the talent difference is substantial this week for the Bills too, who have certainly had their struggles on offense recently. I think it was more about the Steelers just not having like their guys.
And I really think, like you said, Nick, like this is going to be a stars game. Like, and I think here's where I think George Karlaftis stamps his stardom in this game. I really feel like he's going to get a lot of one-on-one matchups that he can win. That I really feel like he can win. You know, Chris Jones is going to get the attention. I just feel like here, like another between Karlaftis or Armina, one of those two really shines and it kind of puts their hat on. Like, I'm a legitimate threat, dominant force that you have to prepare for every week. I think one of those two kind of make a statement like that this week.
Yeah, Amenahu, you know, talk about a guy who has just been an unsung hero. For him to come in,
he's been fantastic.
And missed the first month of the season. I mean, he played 11 games and he finishes with 7 sacks. How many times, like going back the last couple of years, were we like, can this guy just be a 6-sack guy? Whoever it is. Can Mike Dana just give you 6? All right, can you just be a 6 or 7? Because Chris Jones was always looking for help, and now you have Karlaftis having a breakout season, Hugh coming in and immediately being a force. It's been fun to watch. It's been fun to watch this Chiefs defensive front kind of shine this season. Maurice, your key for Chiefs Bills on Sunday night. Where are you going?
So I'm going to stick kind of on the defensive side of the ball too, but more particular on. I think one of the keys is going to be definitely with Gabe Davis being out, how the Chiefs handle the 12 personnel that the Bills run out on the field. And that's in the pass and the run game. You know, Cook has been phenomenal over the last towards the end of the season into the playoffs, really been getting a lot of traction there in the run game. But with Knox healthy and Kincaid, it has posed a problem for opposing defenses. And it's interesting to see how the Chiefs choose to play the 12 personnel, because do you leave 3 linebackers in and go with your base formation and put 2 linebackers in coverage with these 2 tight ends? I think if you do that, it favors Buffalo in a mismatch in some form or fashion. Will they go with 3 safeties and bring Connor in and let Justin Reed and Connor go with the tight ends? Like, that's going to be, I think, an interesting chess match for the Chiefs defense in their play and their scheme. So how do they take, because Buffalo's been heavy in that 12 and been finding a lot of success with it the last couple of weeks. So how the Chiefs come out and handle that 12 personnel and deal with Knox and deal with Kincaid, I think, because I feel like L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie can kind of, in a sense, neutralize whatever Stephon Diggs can do. I think they can limit that. And really a Sneed plays like Sneed's been playing all season. We've seen what he did to Diggs the first game that they had this matchup. If he can match that, then the only thing you really have to focus on at that point is how do you deal with both these tight ends and slow down Cook. You don't have to have a dominant game against the run and hold him to 30, 40 yards. If he gets 70, 80, I think that's fine, right? It's limiting those gashing runs that he gets off at times and limiting those tight ends. So how the Chiefs defense chooses to use play against the 12 personnel, I think, would be a key.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Nate. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's really the interesting thing about like the Bills, like kind of thing in general, is like their whole kind of thing when they drafted Dalton Kincaid was like, well, we're going to get defenses to play like base all the time, and then we'll be able to strut them through the air. And defenses don't really do that because Kincaid and Knox aren't very good blockers. But the one weakness of this Chiefs defense is their run defense. Like all their metrics will tell you they're like a bottom 10-ish run defense. I don't really think it's like a huge problem because like they've only given up more than 20 points like once or twice. So like clearly it's not like destroying their defense that they're not great against the run. But I actually do think Buffalo's going to come out and run the ball. And I think when the Chiefs get into nickel, this is where maybe Derek Nottie being out matters a little bit, because Mike Pennell I thought was really good last week, but Mike Pennell's 35 years old. Like, is he going to be able to play a full game playing nose tackle? That's where the Chiefs, like Chris Jones, has to have a dominant game with the run this week. Mike Pennell has to be competent, but that's where like Jones has to be at his best, because if he's not having his best day against a run, I think it gets actually pretty concerning for the Chiefs defense when the Bills decide to run the ball.
You know what's so interesting about that, when you think about those 2 tight ends, I think Knox had the first touchdown of the game last week for the Bills. When you go back to the struggles early in the season when they weren't winning a ton of games, even though the offense was actually performing pretty well, when they made the switch at offensive coordinator, that kind of coincides with when Stephon Diggs' numbers started dropping off. And the only reason it didn't ever really become a talking point outside of like fantasy football is because that's when the Bills started winning and they started getting guys like Kincaid more involved. They started getting the ancillary receivers, not necessarily Gabe Davis, but guys like Khalil Shakir started stepping up. Sherfield, I think, had a big game last week. So that's a really interesting dynamic, because on one side of the coin, you could say, hey, look at how the Bills offense has changed. Be prepared for that. But then you kind of look at last week and Diggs sort of got going a little bit. And it is the postseason. It's the Chiefs. It's a team that you have a lot of history with against in the postseason. And there's part of me that says, you know, I know what the tape would suggest. Like, I know what this season tells you the Bills want to do on offense. But then there's part of me that says it's the playoffs. Right? It's the Chiefs. It's the Bills. Do you kind of throw some of that out the window and just say, like, Josh Allen's going to drop back and throw to Stephon Diggs 10, 11 times? Like, that's just going to happen. I don't care how they've used him differently. Like all the bets are off for this game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Like I mentioned, the defensive talent is different for the Steelers, but they tried force feeding Diggs to start that game last week. They were like putting him in the slot a lot more and just trying to let's just get him the ball. I'm guessing that let's just be realistic. I'm sure the Bills didn't come out with their best game plan last week against the Steelers, just because they didn't necessarily need it. But this week, now that they need their best game plan, it's going to involve Stephon Diggs. They're not going to be drawing up plays for Trent Sherfield or Deontay Hardy or Khalil Shakir in big spots. It's going to be Diggs. So that's the thing. Like, I am very interested to see how that looks, because if you shut that down, I think that's certainly going to be helpful for them if they want to win.
All right, guys, let's get into some game predictions. Chiefs on the road versus Buffalo, 5:30 kickoff. Maurice, why don't you start us off? How are you feeling?
Oh man, I am torn. It's Buffalo and Kansas City. Like, you just know this thing can go either way, but it's the playoffs. The Chiefs have been in 5 straight AFC Championship games. I think they're going to make it 6. So I can't bring myself to bet against Patrick Mahomes in this city, in this setting. And when I say in this city, that's the city he go. Like, even in Buffalo, I cannot bet against Mahomes and what he's going to do. I think it's going to be. I don't think they're going to hold this Buffalo team to 7 points like they did Miami last week. Like, I don't feel that is happening. But I will go out and say 28-24, Kansas City.
Okay. I like it. Nate, how about you? Where are you going with this one?
Man, this is really close for me. I've been thinking about this game all week, but ultimately what I come back to is my eyes all year have told me that the Bills are better than the Chiefs. I think based off the things I think about, at least, and I'm not right, obviously. I've been wrong on many predictions before, but I just think the Bills have been a little bit better this year. I think the fact that they're at home, I think the fact that they're going to have most of their defensive roster back. I know this sounds dumb, but like, if we're talking about pedigree and like stuff like that, obviously I trust the Chiefs more, but I'm just looking at this team. I just think the Bills are a little bit better. So I'm going to go 23-20. I certainly could see it flipping either way, but like, I just think the Bills this year have a little bit of a margin on the Chiefs. And I think with them being at home, I think they're going to be able to, I don't expect them to fold under pressure. They haven't folded under pressure before. They just, they got 13 seconds. They won, they were going to win that game. So it's close, but everything tells me when I think about this that it's going to be the Bills.
Okay, so I agree with what you just said there, Nate. I think even when the Bills were struggling earlier in the season, like the Chiefs were already going through their own stuff. And I do think the Bills have just been the better team. The Bills are a better team than the Chiefs are. However, I don't think playing in Buffalo gives the Bills much of an advantage. I just don't. Like, I get it. Like, we can talk about the home field advantage. We can talk about the travel situation. I understand all of that, but it's more about it not being a disadvantage for the Chiefs, if that makes any sense. Like, I get the Bills love to play at home. Yeah. I just don't think it's going to impact Kansas City's side of things. I also refuse under any circumstances to bet against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm happy to admit I was wrong after it happens, but I can't bring myself to predict it to happen. I won't do it. And I think that the fact that the Chiefs are on the road, the fact that the Chiefs have been kind of counted out by a lot of people all season long, again, rightfully so, like, what's that going to do to Patrick Mahomes? What's that going to do to his ego, right? Chip on the shoulder. All he needs is an ounce of doubt to like find that extra gear, and for it to be against this team in this situation, I just can't do it. And like, if I'm wrong, I'll admit it, but I'm going to go Chiefs 24, Bills 23, another classic between what I think is the best rivalry in football. So,
Nate, I don't think we're better than. I think we were better than the 2018 Patriots. Yeah. So
yeah, the thing is, I can't argue with anything you said.
So it happens all the time in the past. Yeah.
That's
like,
just
it doesn't matter ultimately what I've seen all season. Yeah. Like
nothing you said is wrong. Everything you said is like factually correct. but
Right.
there's just that one little piece of me that's just like, I can't.
It doesn't
pick
matter.
myself
It's one
to do
game,
it.
right? Like, it doesn't matter
Right.
anymore.
Right. Exactly. Well, boys, I'm glad we got to do this one. It's going to feel like even more free money. Like we're just doubling down on black at the roulette. Like,
Yeah.
I hope we're back again next week and we're going to feel like we're playing on borrowed time yet again. For Nate Christensen, for Maurice Elston, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, review wherever you hear your podcast. And fingers crossed, I hope we are back getting ready for an AFC Championship episode next week. We'll talk to you then.